Good morning, wherever you are. Mars, hello, you've got your cup of tea ready, which
Good
I wish
morning.
I had mine ready, but I don't.
Oh
We're
yeah,
going to be talking about burnout and how to avoid burnout, specifically for birth workers, as you are a formidable birth worker and
thank you very
train
much.
and coach birth workers. You've been at the front line of that kind of work. I'm more behind the scenes in kind of that stuff, but my specialty is burnout, emotional health, well-being, mental fitness, all of that good stuff. So between the two of us, we're going to just throw this one around so that we
Yeah,
can hopefully prize it open and help any kind of birth worker, a doula, a midwife, to really prevent this kind of emotional burnout so you can stay longer in the job that you love, that you feel
yeah,
a passionate calling for, and that you don't feel like you have to abandon it because it's just becoming too much.
yeah.
How does that sound as a kind of the way we're going today with this chat, Mars? If there is anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's exactly what we're talking about. And I think, it's something that we, particularly in the birth world, I don't think doulas think about it, especially not when they first start. Because when they first start, they're like, they become the, for want of a better phrase, the evangelist of birth work. It's like, I got to tell everybody what I do. I got to tell everybody how you can birth well. I got to tell everybody. I got to tell. And then they just get busy. And of course, what they do is they start finding themselves wanting to work with everyone and just moving around. And then all of a sudden, they've just come to a point where they're like, oh, this work is really heavy and hard. And I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. And so what is it that makes birth work so heavy and hard, as you put it? How would you articulate that for someone that maybe hasn't hit that point or that realization yet?
I think what people don't realize is that when you become a doula, you're holding other people's emotions, you're holding space for other people. And I think we forget that is that's an emotional weight on your shoulders. But I love what I do. I love what I do. You can love what you do, but it doesn't mean that it's not emotional and emotionally heavy and it doesn't come at cost to you and your spirit.
Yeah, and also from my perspective, when we have our own emotional stuff going on, that too is heavy. So if you're
Yeah.
going into this kind of work with your own emotional load, where you're carrying day to day the anxiety, the stress that you're juggling that is
Mm,
exhausting you anyway, because when we're
mm.
anxious, when we're juggling these kind of internal conflicts that are making us tired, making us need our coffee. Is that what you're drinking, Mars coffee?
No, I'm actually drinking. I'm not a coffee drinker. I'm actually drinking lemon, ginger, and
Oh,
manuka honey.
lovely,
Someone gave me a
lovely.
massive box of pucker teas, and I haven't really been great with herbal teas. So anytime someone came around to do normal tea being black builder's tea without milk,
Yeah.
um, I would offer them a herbal tea. And then I just started drinking them myself. And this morning I thought, oh, it's a bit cold, and oh, honey and lemon makes me think of late autumn.
Yes,
Oh,
which
yeah.
it
So I
feels
just
right
went and
now.
made myself a cup to keep myself warm whilst you
Yeah.
sit there in what I've decided is tropical France.
Well, back to the coffee though, I think it raises a good point is that a lot of people need coffee. You do just hear a lot of people saying, I've got to have my coffee in the morning. I can't function without coffee. I need my 3 o'clock coffee in the afternoon because
Yeah.
actually they're tired and they need a pep up. They need that emotional, they need an energetic
Yeah.
boost to get them through. And that is a sign of your own emotions, your own emotional state being heavy for you to carry. So if you're
Yeah.
somebody that is wrestling with your own emotional load, then the minute you've got to go into a space where you've got to hold now somebody else's as well, that, that burnout's going to come much faster to somebody who's got that going on because they simply don't have that the energy within them to cope, to handle doing that. And so you need, I think, a good question to ask yourself is, well, where am I emotionally? Where am I in terms of my mental well-being, my
Yeah.
emotional well-being? And am I in a good position to go in and hold space for somebody else that could also be going needing me to hold this kind of weight elsewhere.
Because one of the things that we tell doulas is leave yourself outside the birthing door, which is absolutely valid and absolutely you should do, because you want to be fully present and mindful of this family that you're supporting. But what some doulas neglect to do is to pick it back up, so they keep shoving it away, and then all of a sudden, when they go to pick it up, it's huge.
Yeah.
And but I think it's because this is one of those altruistic professions.
Yes.
Where you want to do good and you want to do for people. And so this is where, and you and I talk about this all the time, this is where phrases like toxic kindness come dropping in, and I've got to do to my detriment, I've got to do to everybody else's detriment. And we ignore that thing that is us, the emotional load that we hold outside of the work. We ignore that, and then we add the emotional load that we bring from work. And then I say things that make them go, oh, I couldn't possibly do that because I'm so very, very good. And I say, you've got to take a step back and almost divorce yourself from what's gone on with your clients. Just take a moment to breathe, catch yourself. Oh, it's not easy to do because I really love them. And I'm like, well, I love all of my clients too, but I still can sort of just step back a bit and go, okay, breathe. And that's the moment where the self-care should be starting.
Yeah. Well, it's that healthy detachment when you've got a very emotionally vested interest in what's going on. That too is sapping your energy because you're giving a part of yourself to it.
Yeah.
And what you really need to be able to do is to kind of hold this thing in front of you without it having some of you in it.
Yes.
So it's this kind of detachment where I'm going to do my very best to help these people and help them on this journey, but your self-validation or your sense of self isn't dependent on this outcome.
Yeah.
Because you're supporting them.
Yes.
And you're not kind of throwing yourself into this equation. But in order to be able to do that there's quite a bit of, in my opinion at least, a bit of inner work required, if not a lot, to enable yourself to be able to hold that kind of detachment with regards to your work. The reason why this is even harder, I think, for people that go into birth work is because birth work does feel like such a calling, like such a mission, because they're like, I want to help women experience an amazing birth, and I had a great birth and I want others to have this, or I had a crappy birth and I don't want women to have this. There's this huge emotional need for processing to go on that is driving the doing that work. Whereas you got somebody that maybe is going to be an accountant, they're like, well, I'm good at numbers, but I'm not really I do it because it earns me money. There's a very different kind of emotional relationship with the work going on there than somebody maybe entering birth work where they feel like they're really on this big mission.
Well, yes, because when you're supporting birthing individuals, it's like one of the most intimate moments of their life. And they have given you the privilege of journeying alongside them. And so this part of your brain's like, don't fuck it up. Part of your brain's like, give them everything,
Yeah.
And so when you're supporting them in this really momentous time, it's easy to deprioritize yourself. Now, I'm not saying, so please, pearl clutchers, I'm not saying you have to center yourself in their birth, but you do have to prioritize yourself in and around it, because your role is to hold them. So you need to make sure that you yourself have been held, whether you're holding yourself or whether you've got support outside that's holding you. For example, we just recently had Baby Loss Awareness Week. And it's a time where I particularly think about one stillbirth that I supported, where my heart was broken too. And it's not my baby, so how much more is their heart broken? But holding myself separate to be able to hold them in the space. But knowing as I was on my way to support them that I'd already alerted one of my besties to say, listen, who you know, who was a birth worker as well at the time, this is what's going on. And she said, doesn't matter what time of day or night, I'm keeping my phone on. I've got you. So I knew I had somewhere to fall to, which meant I could be fully present there. Even as the midwife kept saying, oh, we're here for you too. You can do these things too. Don't. And I said, that's not my role in this birth. My role in this birth is to hold this couple through this time. But when I stepped out of the room, I was able to call my bestie and break down and go, oh my God.
Yeah.
Other than saying, no, I'm the doula. I'm going to hold these things and I'm going to go off and everything's going to be fine. Because it does attach itself to you, but you get to decide what you do with that attachment. You get to decide, how do I care for me? Because if I didn't care for me, I wouldn't have been any good to them. Or maybe I'd have been okay for them. But what they needed in that time was holding. The same with people who are going through trauma and fear as they're birthing. Holding that space for them, but knowing that I've said to someone, listen, I've got a tricky one coming. So can you be available for me afterwards? This is what allows you to follow the ebbs and flows of birth work when you know that you've got, oh my God, I must live by the sea. You know that you've got yourself a safe port to go to.
Yeah.
But it's very easy to forget that and just throw yourself into, no, I won't eat, I won't sleep, I won't drink, I won't cry, I'll just be fully here. I think we misunderstand what fully here means.
Yeah. There's a bit of a misconception as to what that means. Like, I kind of feel like there's this, like, putting your heart in. People feel like they need to put their whole self in.
Yeah.
And not maybe do that.
Yeah.
And you can do that without putting does that make sense? I just feel like it's being this solid container, this kind of, that doesn't allow leakage, so it is a space, a safe space, emotional space where they can be all messy. They can be all gooey and everything, and nothing's going to leak out because they're being held. And equally, but you need to be that without being in that with them. You can't truly hold that if you're in it.
Yes, because that's where we make the mistake. We think that by being everything of me in it, we think we're not centering ourselves because we're doing it for them.
Yeah.
But even that is problematic because actually you are centering yourself. Because, like you say, we're not being that leak-proof container that just gives them the space to be messy. And, when I train doulas, I talk to them all the time about knowing how to be responsive rather than reactive, knowing how to go forward, knowing how to step back, to be that flexible, but that solid container that doesn't leak, that just, they need it to be a little closer in. They need it to be a little further up.
But there's some things that play into that, like when someone is needing to be that space, there are going to be thoughts coming up in their head that are going to interfere with that. So things like, they're going to think I'm doing this wrong. Am I doing it right? No, this is going to be too much. And they're going to think this. They're going to think I'm unprofessional if I say this. Or and there's all of this going on. Yeah. That is going to be getting in the way of them being able to maybe follow their intuition and just be guided by sensitivity, by their compassion, by their, whatever is going on that enables them to be an amazing birth worker. There's going to be all this shit going on that's going to just stop them from being good at doing that, because they're going to be, if I say this, they're going to think this. And if I don't say this, if I back off, they're going to think, what the hell is she doing? And what am I paying her for? Blah, blah, blah. And none of that is helpful, because actually it just gets in the way of you actually holding the space for them.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because we spend so much time trying to be in other people's thoughts, we forget to be with ourselves.
Yeah.
And if even because it happens with the more experienced ones, even the newer doulas who are like, I mustn't put a foot wrong, etc. It's not about you, boo. It's just not about you. Your job is to love them. Your job is to hold them safely. You're not making decisions for them. So if you're not making decisions for them, Why does it make it about you?
Mm.
And that's something I think that we need to consider when we do our birth work.
Yeah. And if you're watching, feel free to drop some comments in or join in the chat. But also this kind of, we're touching on some aspects that we touched on in our last conversation about holding space and being present.
Yeah.
So this is very closely interrelated, you know, your ability to be able to hold space like that. But if you're not holding space appropriately, let's say, then this is what can really cost you energetically and emotionally. And if you've got these bad habits set up in yourself where you are putting too much of yourself into this, where you're not, the space isn't being held in a way that is protecting you, then this is what is going to lead you to burnout much, much quicker than if you were thinking about how what does holding space look like, and what does it look like in terms of what's going to best serve these people I'm helping, and how does it best come from me to ensure that they are being served in the best possible way that also doesn't compromise me.
Yeah. And my brain keeps going back to your comment about holding the container with no leakage. And of course, my brain goes into all sorts of stories. And so I had a beautiful friend around this weekend who cooked me my most favourite pumpkin dish, or possibly my most favourite dish on the planet. But, you know, just because it's the one I want to be buried in doesn't mean anything. And she baked this beautiful pumpkin, and then it has this amazing filling that goes into it, and you bake it some more. Now, you're the pumpkin, the birth worker, you're the pumpkin, right? And you're just there holding this amazing filling that goes in. But then the pumpkin split and things started to come out. Well, your job is to not split. Yeah. Because it means all of that goodness starts to pour out. Don't worry, folks. I know you're worried for me. The tray underneath was able to pour it straight back in. But if your pumpkin splits, then where does your client go? Where does that support for your client go? You're just holding them nice and firmly. But you've looked after yourself. That pumpkin was roasted first. You look after yourself so that you are able to contain the families that you support.
Yeah, yeah.
If I made anyone hungry, I'd just like to not apologise.
No, and I'm just thinking, well, nothing that a good bit of baguette can't sort out to mop up that juicy, creamy filling.
Which will be the external self-care that you do, right?
Yeah.
You know, but yeah.
So what things worked well for you in terms of helping you to maintain that sturdy pumpkin outage?
I made sure that I had people. I mean, I've had some good mentors along the way. I've had some that won't be mentioned. And the good ones are the ones that I could just call and say, listen, this is going on. Or, oh, I've just come back from a birth. It was really good, but I just feel so, So I had people, trusted people. I didn't need to give them details. They just knew, and they held me there. I very deliberately decided that for every birth, I'd book a theatre ticket. So people are like, gosh, you're not cheap, are you? It's like, no, the theatre tickets. But within my charging, and I know we're going to talk about money in a later life, I always put in my childcare budget. Sorry, my self-care budget. So I'm not saying to my client, I'm going to charge you this, and by the way, it breaks down to this is my self-care budget. But when I was doing my pricing, I'm like, right, here's my self-care budget. So I knew with each birth that there was this little, either a theatre ticket or a spa day that was waiting for me afterwards.
Yeah.
So that I could just not be in the birth world for a minute. And I've never been great with going to all of the doula meetups, because sometimes my brain needs to relax from birth. I work in Black maternal health, and I'm an activist, and I have to make sure, because there's so much trauma all around with this and so much work, that I have my pockets of people and space and time that have got nothing to do with the work, so that I can just laugh and relax as like completely, not saying that when you're involved in birth work, you don't laugh and relax. But I don't want to be laughing and relaxing about birth work. I want to be laughing and relaxing because I'm laughing and relaxing. So that's the kind of thing that I would do. Trusted mentors and friends, support system around you, people that you can just talk to and offload to. So when I did the stillbirth, I remember calling her, and she just held space for me, because I think for 45 minutes, all I said was, the baby's dead, you know. And it meant that then I could keep processing it as the days went by, and she was there and someone else was there to just, which enabled me to keep supporting the family. So that's what I do. I find my trusted people, and I always book something that's got nothing to do with birth, just about me, that comes out of the money that I receive.
So that's a really good way of positioning it. I think to know that this birth is actually, there's a chunk of here that's part of self-care, and that self-care is an essential part of me being able to show up and do this work.
Yeah.
And so what does that self-care look like? What's the best self-care so for you, that's theatre, that's having what you needed. But also you strike me as somebody that's very, very sorted in your head. And so maybe you came into this well with a very strong sense of self. And so, or maybe you didn't, I don't know. Have you got anything to speak to that? Because I'm just wondering, what about emotional support, like therapy, or something that's a bit more than just chatting to a friend, that maybe where there is a trauma, they need some maybe intervention or something to really help them process this, maybe from a professional standpoint. Or, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I always thought that you have to stand a step back from people to be able to support them. I've always known that, and people have always misinterpreted that to mean, oh, well, you're cold and uninterested in it. So no, I'm not that. But I have, and do have a coach myself who is just fabulous for just taking, particularly with this work that I'm doing in Black maternal health, who I can she just helps me sort my thoughts and bring myself back to myself so that I come out of it. Because there was, there goes your dog.
My dog.
Because I've escaped. There's a real relentlessness in birth work that people don't talk about. There's a real relentlessness. And she just reminded me that you don't have to be in it all the time. Where are your thoughts taking you? How do we bring you back into centering yourself? How do we, she doesn't say this, but because it's you and because it's on my mind, how do you clear your head trash? Just clear up those things that are going on in your mind so that I can just be. And, I'm very confident and sure of myself, but that takes work, and I have a coach who reminds me exactly why I am all the things that I say I am and portray myself as when I have my moments of not feeling like I am.
Yeah. So for those that maybe for other people, that self-care might include more around that emotional piece to enable them to kind of process some of this stuff and maybe find that sureness within themselves, that confidence within, that they can lean on themselves, that they trust self, and they can do that in a powerful way internally, and they've got depth within them to be able to dig deep. Because when we haven't got that emotional depth, because the foundation isn't solid, you can't dig deep when you need to. So if you have a very particularly trying emotional situation, if you haven't got those reserves, you'll crumble. Like, to go back to your pumpkin analogy, it'll split straight away. Whereas, if you've got those depths, you have a nice, real thick wall to your pumpkin, it can take a little bit of splittage before it all falls apart. So doing that emotional healing work, whatever that looks like, to get you to a good, strong place so that you can take the pressure. It's the pressure, it's that resilience that is going to protect you long term from that kind of burnout.
That's why I think that mentors and coaches and therapists are just so important and so valuable. because you actually get to talk about the thing that matters, the thing that's going on, rather than saying the things that people want you to be saying on the outside. How are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Everyone's good. Everyone walks away. When actually you're like, I'm fucking crumbling here.
Yeah, yeah. And then you add family pressures to that. If you've got, if you're a mum with kids and you're juggling childcare, schooling, blah blah blah, plus birth work, I mean that can really add another dimension that that will rapidly shorten your career as a doula, I would imagine.
Absolutely, but that's why I believe. So there was for a while there was this pushback against self-care. Oh, we're all so self-centered, but actually, I believe that self-care is community care. Because if you look after yourself, well, okay, let's just remind you all that I'm 27 plus change, and shipping and handling. But as Oprah says, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. If you're not happy, nobody's happy. So what is it that you need to do to look after yourself so that your self-care means that you can give out when you're giving out? You're practicing community care. So you don't have to look after yourself so that you can look after others, but you kind of do. You can just look after yourself because you need to look after yourself. But when you do that, it means that the community care is much easier because you've got more to give from. You've got more solid foundations and the surety that you spoke about earlier.
You've got greater capacity to give when you've given that to yourself first.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this work is heart work. So there's a lot of pain that we're putting on our heart, particularly if you go in to advocate and you're advocating for or with your client and the birth isn't picture perfect. And simple things, let's come out of the emotional, let's go into the physical. If you're one of those people that finds yourself pushing as your client's pushing, because and you're not doing that gentle breathing, but you're quite physically feeling your pelvis and your pelvic floor just pushing down, then you're causing physical changes in your body when you're not resting enough, when you're not eating and drinking because you're thinking about your client. The very other things that we tell their partner to make sure that they do, to rest, to eat, to drink, to take breaks during the labour, etc. And then you don't do it. And I'm not saying it's like, right, sorry, it's been 2 hours, I'm clocking off for an hour to do something else. But you know how it works, and you know how it works within your work, etc. So how do you look after yourself emotionally, physically, spiritually? Where do you gather? And what does burnout look like to you? I'd love to know what people think burnout looks like, because I think burnout looks different for different people.
Yeah. I had a bit of an experience of burnout just earlier this year where I had what I think most mums dream of, which is my other half decided to take the kids back to the UK because I'm in France to visit the family. So I had like 2.5, 3 weeks on my own, which was, I was just so giddy with excitement. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to do da 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 da. And I had like so much stuff planned. And then like they went, and 2 days later, I just crashed. I literally could not get out of bed. I just spent my days crying. I was just like, I could not function. And it was like, but I've got all this stuff that I want to do, and it was just really like, and I was like, oh, this is, I spoke to French because you've got PTSD. I was like, come again? Like, hang on a minute. I work on myself. Like I do a lot of self work.
Yeah.
But the holding of the space, I've had a daughter that's been very ill for 6 months. And I realized that just holding her and holding the space so I could be there for her. And the minute she wasn't there to hold, it was like, oh, okay, now I've just got to like...
Your pumpkin split.
Yeah, exactly. It finally split. And I was able to do that in the safe space of being alone. I didn't need to hold it for somebody else.
Yeah.
So I suspect that was a dose of burnout. And I spent 5 days with some hardcore self-care, doing lots of different things to help me get through that. And then was turned it around. But I suspect, I'd love to hear from other people, put your comments in if you've experienced something that what you felt was burnout. But this inability, where you feel like you're just I just felt like I was in a ditch and I just couldn't get out. And that no matter how much I'm just going to sit and wallow in this ditch. And I just wallowed and I was okay. This is all I can do. I can't do anything else right now.
Yeah.
But it was really hard.
Yeah. And it's that that moment in which we need to show ourselves compassion.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes some people will take on too many births, any number of reasons. They need the money. They feel that they really want to support this couple. Oh, now there's another couple that they really need to support. Oh, and there's the couple that they'd already booked in to support. So just constant moving with no pauses and no in-betweens. I know that after births, I would just take a day off, at least a day off. And that day might be spent lying on the couch whilst the telly watched me, or I might be in bed, or I might just go for a walk on my own. Frankly, mostly, I was just in bed, wrapped up in a duvet, you know, just coming down and coming back to myself.
Yeah.
And it's when we forget that day-to-day life gets in the way. So when we're prepping to work with our clients, what are we prepping for the aftermath for ourselves?
Yeah. And that needs to be part of it. And I guess when they're booking in maybe too many births, this is tied into what our next video is about, which is about making money. And maybe they're doing that because they need the money, which goes back to, well, maybe they're not pricing their births correctly to enable them to build in some self-care so that they can stay and do this in a healthy way for them and for the families they're supporting, which I think acts a nice little segue to the next video, which we're going to be doing in about a week, isn't it? It's about this time next week. We're going to be talking about making money and thriving as a birth worker. And how, you know, the topics that we've picked for these conversations are very closely linked. You know, the first one was about holding space and being present. And we talked a lot about that today, which is very then closely tied to burnout. And therefore the next video, which is closely tied to, you know, the financial side, maybe the reason that you are burning out is because of you're not pricing it adequately, that is forcing you to work and burn both ends of the candle. And how all this is just, you can't isolate any of these one things. They're all part of life as a birth worker and a doula.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, but I suppose the point of this conversation is to say, what does burnout look like for you? Do you recognize when you're coming close to burnout? What do you do, as you did, Alexia, to hard reset with yourself? Or if you find yourself moving towards burnout, what are you putting in place to say, oh, hold on, I need a pause? You know.
And what can you do to prevent that burnout from actually hitting? Because you can start getting a sense that it's hurtling your way by maybe this exhaustion that you're feeling, by just, you know, sort of getting out of bed just starts feeling really hard. You're very groggy, you know, you're just feeling drained. So that tells you that it's kind of hurtling your way. So at that point, you can start taking action. I would say at that point, you need to start doing hardcore, serious inner work. Because the reason that you're struggling is because of unresolved conflicts and traumas and blah, blah, blah. That, to me, is the fastest way for you to protect yourself for what's heading your way. And you can avert it. But otherwise, then just slow down. Just slow down. More walks in nature. Back off. Do the massages, whatever it is that's putting you first, so that you can give yourself some more breathing space. You've got that depth, that you know, help resilience.
Absolutely. And so, and that's nothing. We wouldn't wish burnout on anyone. And for you to be fully present with your client, those of you that are listening and watching, consider how you slow that train so that you can be fully present for them and for yourself. You need to find those times when you are fully present for yourself so that you recognize what's going on.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Mars. And of course, I hope everybody has appreciated that we match tops today. Totally did not plan that. And see if we get to end up doing a serendipitous matching of tops next week.
Well, I'm not telling you what colour I'm wearing.
No. So if you want to join us for another conversation, this time it's going to be all around the financial aspects, making money and thriving as a birth worker, a doula, then tune in for our conversation. You follow it on the Fear-Free Childbirth Facebook page. We're also in the Fearless Birthing Birth Worker group, and also you've shared it in some of your groups, Mars. So just come and find us where you're at. The comments, we're following comments on the Fear-Free Childbirth page and also in the Fearless Birth Workers group. So if you are here and live or not, if you're watching the replay, then just comment below and we're going to be around to respond to those comments or questions if you have any questions.
Yes.
We will be around to do that if you are watching the replay. All right, thank you very much. And thank you from Mars for joining me today. It's been great as ever.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.